Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I like to talk to you about the books I read in February. February was a pretty average reading month for me in terms of the number of books I read, but it was a really above average rating on all of these books. Like, I'm surprised. I read a lot of really good books, books that I really enjoyed and that I'd like to have a quick chat with you about. So let's get started. The first book that I finished in February, I finished this February 1st. It was almost a January read, but it's Agatha Christie's The Murder at the Vicarage. So this is the first Miss Marple book, and I did read this as part of the kind of reading challenge that Mara over at Books Like Whoa is running. And I really loved it. It's totally like a super cute, cozy, like whodunit. I didn't know whodunit. I wasn't able to guess. My guess is actually wrong. But it's a nice little quick read. And then this editions of it, I also first kind of saw over at Mara's channel. And they're really nice. It's the facsimile editions. So yeah, it was really, this was my first Miss Marple and I really, really enjoyed it. I gave this 5 stars because it was just a really great read, and the reading experience was also really great. I kind of beat up the book a little bit because I took it with me to Vegas, but there we go. The next book that I read in February was Becoming by Michelle Obama. I listened to it in audiobook because she's the one that narrates it, and I've been telling everyone about this book that I can talk to about it because it was wonderful. If you like Michelle Obama already, I think you're going to enjoy the book very much. She does give you a little behind the scenes of like some of the stuff that that the Obamas went through, and kind of her take on things and all of that. But what I mostly got out of it was empowerment. She's a really empowering individual. She really believes in education, and hearing her talk about like how that's always been a key element like of her work and of who she is was really wonderful. But honestly, the biggest thing for me was hearing her voice. I was super stressed out and anxious throughout the entire month of February. And actually, can probably pull it back a little, but I swear that listening to her voice on the drive to work and back really helped me de-stress a little bit. Like, it didn't take my stress away, but it felt like comfort food, like a warm blanket rubbed around me to hear her voice. So I really, really loved it. 5-star read for me, and I highly recommend the audiobook if you're interested in Becoming. The next book I also listened to an audiobook on my commute, and it's The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I loved it. I am not a poetry person, guys. And maybe that goes from like being forced to do poetry in school. But when I found out that this was in verse, I actually put off reading it. Like, I almost bought it several times, and then I was like, no, it's poetry. I can't do poetry. But then everybody kept talking about how wonderful this book was, so I finally picked it up in audiobook because Elizabeth Acevedo also reads it, and it's just beautiful. I think if you're not really into poetry and verse, you should give this a shot in audio because it made it extremely accessible. And it's a story, and she tells the story in verse just really wonderful. It was another 5-star read for me. So these first 3 books were all 5-star reads, and I can't recommend it enough. Yeah. What is it about? The Poet X. I should tell you a little bit about that. So it's about a teenage girl who is of an immigrant family, and she's dealing with a lot of like body image issues, and kind of all the emotions and all of that comes with being a teenager. And it was just so incredibly beautiful. Again, cannot recommend it enough. The next book that I read was Vox by Christina Dalcher. So this was another audiobook for me. The narration of this was also really good. I really enjoyed it. This was a 4-star read for me. It's kind of this book keeps getting compared to The Handmaid's Tale, and I think it is a good comparison. So the premise of it is that you are in like a recent time in the U.S., and women are not allowed to speak more than 100 words a day. And there's a wrist thing that kind of counts the number of words they speak in a day, and if you go over, it like shocks you. And the more words you speak over your limit, the more shock you get. And so one of the problems that I hear a lot of people discuss when they criticize The Handmaid's Tale is that it seemed implausible and that there's not enough an explanation of how you got to the point in which the world exists. And in some respects, this book fixes that problem in that you get to hear about how they get to the point. The fact that there were protests, that people didn't just accept changes without a fight, but why the fight was imbalanced and why kind of a very conservative, very religious government ended up winning and using violence in the way that they do. It's also, to me, like, it's not a bleak book. Like, it doesn't believe that we're doomed or that everything's terrible. I felt like one of the main messages in this book was do something when you can. Like, don't wait for things to get so bad that everybody's suffering. Like, when you see the signs, stand up, do something. Your vote matters, your voice matters. It felt really empowering in that way. But this book is not going to be for everyone. If, as I'm describing all of this, you're like, yeah, no, then don't even pick it up. You'll hate it. But if you like The Handmaid's Tale, I think you would like this one. If your problem with The Handmaid's Tale was that there wasn't enough explanation, I think you might want to give this one a shot because it does kind of address that problem. Now, for some people, these kinds of books are still like, it's hard for people to imagine how in real life that could ever actually happen. And as a historian, I feel like I have to jump in and just say, they're exaggerating some things, but a lot of the stuff that a lot of these kinds of feminist, kind of post-apocalyptic type stories do is they grab from history. A lot of the elements that we see in there, they have already happened. Not to the extremes in which the book takes them, but what the book does is they take an idea that's already been taken to an extreme and it just takes it further. And so I like reading these. I like them. So if you like these kinds of stories, I think you would enjoy Vox. All right, next book that I read was for my in-person book club, and it is Sunburn by Laura Lippman. And I gave this 4 stars. It would be like a 4.5 stars for me. It's the first Laura Lippman book that I've read. I know a lot of people really like her, but this is really wonderful. So the story starts with this woman with her family in like a beach town on the East Coast, and she, while her daughter is with her husband, she picks up all her stuff from the place they're staying at, and she leaves. She leaves town and she stops at a small town diner to grab some food. And in the diner, she meets this man who is kind of interested, and they're both spending the night there. And they don't spend the night together there, but they're both kind of interested in each other, and they both end up staying in this town where neither one of them planned to stay at. There is a bit of a murder mystery in here, but it's a bit of, what would be the genre for this? It's a bit of a thriller. It's a noir story. That's what it is, and it does play homage to a lot of the old noir like films. The whole time you're wondering who you can trust. I thought that Laura Lippman did a really great job of pacing this book because just when you think you understand what the dynamics are, a new piece of the puzzle comes along that shifts the way you look at things. And so you are trying to figure out, you know, can I trust these characters? Who's right? What's really going on here? And it felt really like it kept me wanting to read more. And in a month in which I was really anxious, I did not think I was going to like this book because I was like, a thriller-ish, I don't know. And it grabbed me and it kept me really interested. The characters were interesting enough, and to dig into their issues was really great. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. So if you've never picked up any Laura Lippman, I highly recommend Sunburn. It was very good. The next book that I read in February was, which one was it? It was The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. And I read this because this was one of the options for in one of my classes for students to read. And it's a retelling of the Iliad. If you're not familiar with the Iliad, it's a part of the Trojan War story. It's 10 years or so into the Trojan War, and Achilles gets angry. The first word is of the Iliad, depending on the translation, is rage, and it's so a big theme in the Iliad is the rage of Achilles, and basically how he finally confronts Hector, which is the Trojan hero, and what happens. This book, The Silence of the Girls, takes the story of the Iliad and refocuses it through the eyes of Briseis, I think I'm saying that correctly. And in my head, I always pronounce it incorrectly. That's what I say. But who is one of the women at the center of the conflict. There's very few women in the Iliad, but Briseis had been won by Achilles in war. Like she was war booty, and she is taken away from him at one point in the Iliad, and it's part of what drives him to kind of be angry at the Greeks and to sit the battle out. So this story refocuses through her eyes and really looking at how this particular war affected women and how little attention they get in the Iliad. So in large part, it's a critique of the Iliad's portrayal of the women. And by centering on the women, you get a different part of the story. I don't want to say too much because I might do actually a video on this in the next book that I read, or one of the next books I read in February, just talking about retellings of the Iliad. But this was a 5-star read for me. I really, really enjoyed it. And because my students are currently writing papers on it, I'm going to reserve all other thoughts for a video in the future. The next book that I read was The Daily Show, an oral history as told by Jon Stewart and the correspondents of The Daily Show. I listened to this in audiobook, and it was a total mistake. Not really. I ended up giving the book 3 stars because I enjoyed it. The Daily Show was a big part of my college years. I think The Daily Show was great at articulating what a lot of us felt was going wrong in the country, especially during the Bush years. And so, that generation really respected, I think, Jon Stewart at the very least, because he could deliver commentary with comedy so excellently. And we got a lot of comedic geniuses that came out of that show. They take you through the whole history of the show, and like Colbert comes in, and Steve Carell is there, and then more and more correspondents start jumping in, and you're like, oh yeah, I totally remember, and it's great that way. Now, if you're looking for a whole lot of behind-the-scenes gossip stuff, there's very little of that there. There were only a couple of elements in there where I was like, oh, I didn't know that was going on. For me, it was mostly a kind of nostalgic walk down memory lane of my college years, which is great. The audiobook, however, is not narrated by any of them. Not by Jon Stewart, not by Steve Carell, not by Colbert, not by John Oliver, not by Jason Jones, Samantha Bee, none of it. The format of the book is interviews with all these people. And so I thought the audiobook would be great, and it because you recognize these people's voices, and when someone else is doing their bits, you're like, that's not them. Like, it's just not them, because we know what they sound like. Once I got over that, I ended up enjoying the book, but oh man, yeah, that's what I got to say about that one. And yeah, the Song of Achilles, I also read in February, and this was another retelling of the Iliad, but this one is young adult. It starts off with Patroclus, who is depending on who you are in the Iliad, Patroclus is like his second in command, his best friend. A lot of scholars also read the relationship as being a romantic relationship, and so that's the take that this book uses. Madeline Miller focuses on Patroclus, telling the story of the Iliad through Patroclus' eyes and depicting a romantic relationship between Patroclus and Achilles. And Miller does a really wonderful job with it. I think I gave this 4.5 stars because she does a really good job of humanizing Achilles, because she starts the story off when they're kids. We start with Patroclus before he meets Achilles, and then takes us into their meetings, their interactions, how they fall in love with each other, what that means for each of them, and then how then the setting of war changes things a bit for them. And I thought it was really wonderful, really beautiful story. And this is another one that some of my students are writing about, so I don't want to say too much, but I really, really love it. I think the Iliad can sometimes, a lot of people can really dislike the Iliad when they read it, because it wasn't meant for a modern audience, and there's a few elements in there that I think modern audiences are uncomfortable with, but these retellings really kind of take these stories into the modern world and make it meaningful to us. And by centering it on a romantic relationship between two young boys and then two young men, I think it really makes it relevant and alive. And I really, really loved it. And I'm really excited because I do have Miller's more recent book, Circe. And that myth is one that I don't know as well as I know the Iliad, but I'm excited to see what she did with that one as well. So is that it? I believe that's it. Those are the books that I read or listened to in February. So let me know if you've read any of them, what you think, or if you're going to pick up any of them. I would also love to hear that. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.